Welcome back to the Garage Owners Network, where we help independent garages go from surviving to thriving, one tiny change at a time. And today we're talking about onboarding. Not inductions or orientation, you know, the sort of thing. Here's a space for your toolbox, there's the kettle, crack on. But onboarding, the process that turns new hires into members of your gang, people who believe in the mission. Because if you've ever wondered why your new mechanic starts strong but fades fast, or why your new front of house never quite fits in, it might be because you've been onboarding their hands but not their hearts. My name's Andy Crook, and my mission is to help garage owners become more successful in business. And how I do that is I go live every week on one of the 5 pillars of business as I see it. This week we're in the people and performance pillar. So picture this, it's Monday morning. The new tech arrives, toolbox gleaming, spanners polished, and you show them where the kettle is. You point out the toilets, you hand them their first job card, and walk away thinking, sorted. Fast forward 3 months, and they're doing the work, sure, but there's no spark, there's no real ownership. They're doing their job, but they're not living your mission. Does that sound familiar? Most garages mistake inductions or orientation for onboarding. Inductions explain what we do here. Orientation explains how we do it here. But onboarding explains why we do it here. As Simon Sinek explains in his Start With Why TED Talk, most organizations communicate from the outside in. They start with what they do, move into how they do it, but probably never reach why they exist. The best leaders always do the opposite. They communicate from the inside out, from why, then how, and then what. And that why, that sense of purpose, is exactly what Mike Michalowicz calls the first ingredient of an all-in team in his book, All In. When you onboard someone by starting with why, you're not telling them what to do or how to do it. You're helping them to believe in why it matters. That belief turns in a job into a mission, and that new hire into part of your gang. And that why is what Mike Michalowicz calls the first ingredient of an all-in team. And in All In, Mike talks about 3 pillars that build unstoppable teams. And those pillars are purpose, safety, and belonging. If you've been listening for a while, you know I'm a big fan of Mike and his books because it really brings subjects to life. And that's what I'm going to try and do in this short training topic, is I'm going to try and let you know what the difference is between onboarding someone or just doing a simple induction. So let's start with purpose. Every member of your team, whether they're fixing a clutch or answering the phone, wants to know that what they do matters. So instead of saying we fix cars, try saying we keep families safe on the road. Instead of saying we service vehicles, try saying we give people confidence every time they turn that key. That's onboarding with purpose. And when you welcome someone new, tell them the story of why your garage exists, why you serve who you serve, and why customers keep coming back, and what you're proud of. Let them see the bigger picture, the mission that they're now part of. Because people don't go in all in on a payslip, they go all in on a purpose. Now, I've talked about why before in previous training topics, and once you get used to talking and communicating from the inside out, the why out and not the what in, everything you do starts with the why. So the second pillar from All In that Mike Michalowicz talked about is safety. Now, we're not talking about PPE or risk assessments, although those do matter. Physical safety is every bit as important as psychological safety. But it probably gets priority, and we don't really think about psychological safety so much. But psychological safety is about creating an environment where your team feels safe to speak up, make suggestions, or even mistakes without fear of embarrassment or blame. Ask yourself, does your onboarding process show people that it's okay to ask questions? In fact, that it's vital, if you don't know something, to stop and ask. So most garages don't. We just throw the new hires in at the deep end. We often think we think about how much we're paying and we go, well, they've been in the trade long enough, I'm sure they'll figure it out. And then we wonder why they don't innovate, why they don't take ownership of things. When you create psychological safety, you create trust. Try this during your onboarding. Have a first week fix session. Ask your new hire what they'd change, if they could, what they had noticed that could be improved. Because that shows straight from the offset that you value their perspective from day one. And here's the kicker. When they feel safe, they start to care. And when they care, they start to contribute. And when they contribute, they start to own it. The final pillar is belonging. Think about your own team. Do you think they feel part of something, or are they just part of the payroll? Most garages stop at inductions. This is John. He's the new tech. But belonging doesn't happen by accident. It's built intentionally. When you build it, your new hires feel seen, supported, and included. And here's how you can start. So the first thing you should think about doing if you're going to onboard rather than just do an orientation or an induction is assign a buddy, someone who's not the boss but who knows the ropes, and then share the wins. Let them hear stories of customers you've helped, but always include them early. Remember, ask their opinion on the next workshop improvement, even if they've only been there a week. When people feel like they belong, they stop thinking about your garage and they start saying our garage. You want to create a garage gang. Notice I use the term gang. I hear a lot of people in business talking about their business family, and sometimes they talk about friends. Now, I have a slightly different opinion on this because I think back to when I was a sort of a young lad, a little tearaway, that young rascal that I was, and I was always part of a gang. And gangs aren't family. In fact, I didn't have any family in my gang, but I felt a strong sense of belonging. And often, if you're of my age, a gang defended something, whether that be a den, if you remember those days, or something else. We were part of something bigger than just us. But we weren't family, and we were friends, but we were drawn together by a common cause. And that's what I think we ought to think about building within our business. They're not family, so don't treat them like family. They're more than friends. We have a shared identity, and that makes them your garage gang. At least that's the way I like to look at it. So let's bring this to life. Imagine you've hired a new front of house team member. We'll call her Sarah. In the old way, the induction and orientation and away method, you'd show her the computer, explain the job beacon system, maybe the garage management system, hand her a script and wish her luck. She's been doing a job like this before, she'll be fine. If we think about onboarding and all-in onboarding, as Mike talks about in his book, on day one, she sits down with you, the garage owner. You tell her the story of the business, how you started in a single bay unit and how you've grown by word of mouth, and how every satisfied customer represents a bit of trust earned. You show her the why. Then she shadows calls, not to learn the scripts, but to hear the tone, the care, the ownership that people take in your business. She meets her buddy, maybe your best customer service champion, who tells her we don't just book in the jobs, we build relationships. By the end of week one, she knows she's not just answering the phones, she's now the voice and the face of the business. And that's onboarding that sticks. So here are 3 takeaways that I've taken from the book All In that can transform onboarding in your garage. The first one is always lead with purpose. Always start with your why. Show your new hires the story that they're stepping into, the story they're now part of. The second one is create safety, and that's psychological as well as physical safety. Make it okay to ask. In fact, make it imperative that they ask. Suggest, and even it's okay to fail. That's how people grow, and it's how your business grows around them. And build that belonging. Don't just introduce them to the gang, integrate them into your mission. When you get these 3 things right, people don't just turn up, they show up and they go all in. So next time someone new joins your garage, don't just show them the kettle, show them the cause. Because if you want your team to go all in, you have to show them why from day one. Remember, if you should, you must. and what's stopping you is probably starting. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you next time.